This morning I watched a video from Michael K. Vaughn titled, "Will I Leave Behind Thousands of Books?" And I love Michael K. Vaughn's channel. It was a really great video. You should watch it if you haven't. But it got my gears turning because I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, just as Michael mentioned that he'd been thinking about this lately a lot too, because, what happens to your books after you die? Or you're in a situation where you can't take your books with you or something like that. Who gets them? What are you going to do with them? And that's what this video is about. Who gets your books? I'm Randy Ray, and I am the host of The Literate Texan, which is a channel where I talk about books, highbrow, lowbrow, everything in between. And as you can see behind me, I have quite a few books here in my house. I've got a 4-bedroom house with a bookshelf in every room, and books filling the shelves on all the bookshelves in every room. I think the hallway bathroom doesn't have a bookshelf, but I think that might be the only room in the house that doesn't have a bookshelf. Books just pile up and collect around here. When I was growing up, my mom was a big reader, and she bought paperback books, but she also bought some hardcovers, and she belonged to some book clubs, the kind of book clubs where you get 6 books for a penny, but then you have to buy 4 more books over the course of the next 4 years or something like that. She got involved in those all the time too. So I grew up in a house full of books. They weren't always the books that I wanted to read. She did have condensed versions. That's what they called them then, was condensed versions. They were just edited versions of a lot of classics. So, my first exposure to things like David Copperfield were heavily edited, and Don Quixote, heavily edited, shorter than they would be. I didn't have any money as a kid, and so I wasn't buying books. But my dad and I went down to the public library, and he got a library card. He didn't have one before, but at the point where I wanted to start really taking my reading up to the next level, he and I went to the public library, and he got a library card that I was allowed to use. And then when I got old enough, and I think at the time in Bonham, Texas, if you were 12 years old, you could get a library card of your own. I got a library card of my own. So that's constantly reading books, but I didn't own very many books of my own. Just those aforementioned classics, those were kind of mine. They were at least in my room. But then I had, some science fiction anthologies that my mom had bought me. There was an edition of Sherlock Holmes that I had, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. I had both of those, but I didn't have any of the novels or any of the subsequent books. In fact, I thought the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes was the end of the story for years and years because of the final problem. I didn't know anything about The Empty House and the Return of Sherlock Holmes. Anyway, I think I'm starting to ramble a little bit. Forgive me for that. But point is, I chose a life with books, and I wound up with a house full of them. And I'm not getting any younger, and I'm not getting any healthier. About 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and it's the kind of cancer that has no cure. So that really started me thinking. And then, I've had a lot of relatives die in the last couple of years too, for various reasons. Mostly just because they're getting older, strokes here, heart attacks there, cancer here, you name it. They've been coming through lately which I guess isn't unusual when you're in your mid-50s. The generation prior to you starts dying in waves. And that's exactly what's been happening in my life too. And a surprising number of people that are my peers have died too. Some of you know that I go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's the dinest bunch of people I've ever met. And I have a wide range of friends, just a host of fellows, as they say in the literature for AA. But, the truth is, those people are, like me, hadn't exactly taken care of their health over the years and stuff. So, a lot of them just don't make it. I have 3 kids, Okay, so that might not be the only reason I need to get rid of books in the event of my untimely death. Obviously, I don't want to leave behind a stack of books that's unwieldy for my kids to have to deal with. And that was, in fact, what inspired Michael K. Vaughn's video was Sean Standfast recently passed on. And he left behind thousands of books without any instructions of what to do with them or anything. And luckily, he has a good friend who's taking care of that for him. But I've talked with my main daughter. I have 3 kids, but I have one daughter that's still speaking to me. The other kids are mad at me for the moment, and so she and I have talked about what we're going to do. And she's made it clear she don't want all these books. Okay, at one time I was hoping my kids would really want to inherit my library, but now that I've gotten older, I realize she doesn't read the same things that I do, and probably never will. So she'll want to keep a very small subset of my books if something happens to me. But she damn sure won't be keeping all of them. Her boyfriend, who's liable to become her husband, they seem to be getting along pretty well, and they've been together for a while, and they've talked about it. He's like me, an English literature major, and he's going to go on to teach school, as I did in my youth. And he might be interested in a broader variety of my books than my daughter is even, and that'll be okay too. But here's the thing: I got to start thinning the stacks. I've got to start being intentional about this. Michael mentioned the gentle art of Swedish death cleaning or something to that effect. The idea is that you spend the first half of your life accumulating things, and the second half of your life getting rid of things. And I'm at that point where it's time to start getting rid of things. The thing is, I've got this Kindle here, and we've talked about this in a previous video. I've got 1,300 books downloaded to this baby right here. And it's not heavy, okay? It's very portable. It's, and it's even easily replaceable, if a few $100. And I've got, my library back. Like, for example, if this got run over by a truck or something. But, like Michael K. Vaughn, I am not worried about Kindle and these digital rights issues. Yeah, it's possible that Kindle or Amazon might go away and take away all my ebooks, but I think that's about as likely as a fire burning all the physical books in my home. It's not something that I'm particularly worried about, and don't think necessarily most people should be. I guess there are people out there who just hate to read on e-readers too, and they're going to make sure they hate reading on e-readers and that they love reading real books. But when you're dealing with someone like me, I'm starting to have vision problems. And I literally am unable to read a book on paper. None of these books back here, they're useless to me in terms of being read from at this point. Now, I'm seeing an eye doctor this week, and I'm hoping that some new glasses will take care of it, but I may have cataracts or something too, or I could be losing my sight. It does happen to some people over time. At any rate, the reading will continue in one format or the other, regardless of what happens there in my life anyway. So yeah, I've got to start thinning the books. And one of the things that I need to thin is anything here that's a physical book that I've also got duplicated on my Kindle. I really don't need it. It's just something on a shelf at that point. Books are for reading. I'm firmly convinced of that. I know that there are collectors out there who like to keep their books in pristine condition. I have never had a book yet that I didn't want to open up and read. That's the whole point in having it. I had a copy of a short story collection called Feasters in the Lake, of which I think there were only like 400 copies ever printed. Absolutely terrific book. But I wasn't going to not read it just so I could keep it in super perfect mint condition. I read the book, and it's been read now, and it's not damaged, but it's not in brand new condition anymore either. But it's in condition that most collectors would appreciate. But yeah, so first of all, yeah, and then if I'm not going to read a book that's on my shelf or reread a book on my shelf, it needs to go, okay? So I've got a number of books here that I haven't read yet. For example, I got Infinite Jest back here. Hadn't read it yet, but I'm going to. So it stays, okay? I'm not planning to kick the bucket tomorrow, the next day, or even next week. Nobody makes plans, but I am, trying to be thoughtful about this. And, I don't want my daughters and my son and my, son-in-law, if there is one someday, I don't want them making decisions that I just didn't get around to making when it came to my book collection here. I have a friend, very dear friend, who's an antique book collector. He used to be in antique book sales. That's how we knew each other. We both owned bookstores at the same time. And my daughters have his contact information, and when it comes time to go through my library, they'll get with him. They might also get with Don down at Recycled Books and Records. You know, they will come out and pack up a whole estate. In fact, about 10, 12 years ago, I had to sell my entire library one month because I'd gone broke, and I sold my entire library and made enough money off of it to pay the rent that month. And then I've gradually rebuilt my library again because, like I say, books just trickle into my life and they don't seem to leave. So anyway, it's an interesting question. What's going to happen to my books after I'm gone? Also, I did tell my daughters to do occasionally flip through the books on the shelves because sometimes I'll use money as a bookmark. Anyway, I want to sum up my attitude about books these days as being different than they used to be. There was a time when I just wanted to have a lot of books, and I've succeeded in that, and I have a lot of books. But I've come to the conclusion, and this didn't used to be true, and it may or may not be true for you, and that's fine. Everybody goes their own way. But to me, these books, they're not furniture, and they're not decor. They're meant to be read, okay? And my goal is no longer to own a bunch of books. My goal now is to read really good books. And it's not even to read a whole lot of really good books. I'd like to read a lot of good books, but I'd rather read a handful of books if they're really, really good than otherwise. So anyway, I just wanted to make a quick response video to Michael K. Vaughn's video this morning because it's been on my mind lately too. With any luck, both Michael K. Vaughn and I will be here discussing this kind of thing, 20 or 30 years from now too. So anyway, until then, thanks for watching, and please stay hydrated, folks, and stay sexy.